My name is Elise Morrow. I am 34 years old, and for the past decade I have worked as an investigative journalist in Lyon, France. My husband, Adrien Dubois, is 36, a quiet software engineer whose gentle nature often masks a deeper fragility. He grew up in a household where his voice was overlooked, his needs treated as insignificant. That childhood left its mark. Even now, conflict makes him retreat inward, as though silence could shield him from pain. For a time, our life together felt steady, even tender, a rhythm of small rituals and quiet evenings that carried us through the years. But then came Camille Laurent. My sister-in-law is 32, glamorous, and endlessly visible. With her lifestyle blog and curated photos, she attracts thousands of followers who believe every smile she posts is genuine. Yet behind that digital glow lies a woman who has turned our marriage into something fragile, almost unbearable. What makes it harder is that my own body has betrayed me. I have endured 3 miscarriages, each one cruelly arriving in the second trimester, when hope feels solid and the future already imagined. Each time I held Adrien's trembling hand, trying to stay strong even as my own grief hollowed me out. Our story begins there, with loss, silence, and the storm Camille carried into our lives. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. The names I had chosen for the children I would never hold, Amelie, Louis, and Sophie, became the only fragile comfort I had. They were not merely names. They were promises, whispered dreams, the invisible thread between myself and the life that was denied to me 3 times. I would write them down in the margins of my notebooks, trace them with my finger against the cold window at night, almost as though speaking them aloud might summon their presence. For me, those names were sacred. They were my memorial, my way of saying, you existed even if the world never met you. Camille knew this. She knew because I had once trusted her enough to share my grief. In the early days of my marriage, I believed her to be not only Adrien's younger sister but also a friend, someone with whom I could be vulnerable. I told her everything, the silence in the hospital corridors, the way my body had failed me, the hours spent staring at the ceiling with nothing but emptiness inside. She nodded sympathetically then, her perfectly manicured hand resting on mine, assuring me she understood. I was foolish enough to believe her. When Camille had her first child, a daughter, she announced the name at her baby shower. Standing before a crowd of laughing friends, glasses of champagne in their hands, she declared with a sparkle in her eye, "Her name will be Amelie. After all, Elise can't use it, can she?" The words hit me like a slap across the face. Everyone laughed, as if it were some clever joke, but I stood frozen, my palms sweating, my throat burning with unshed tears. Adrien was beside me, smiling awkwardly, and when I whispered later that it felt cruel, he sighed and said I was being too sensitive. "It's only a name, Elise," he told me, as if language were not capable of wounding, as if my grief could be reduced to something trivial. But I knew the difference. A name can carry an entire world of memory. For me, Amelie was the daughter I imagined cradling, the baby I would have sung to sleep. Hearing Camille claim that name as if she had earned it ripped open a wound that had barely scarred over. Cruelty did not stop there. 2 years later, Camille had her second child, a boy. When she revealed his name on Instagram, I felt my stomach twist. "Welcome to the world, little Louis," the caption read, followed by, "Thank you, Elise, for the inspiration. Your loss is my joy." She added a smiling emoji at the end, as though mocking me were just another piece of curated content for her audience. The photo showed Camille in her immaculate nursery, a pastel blue room filled with toys and light. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, unable to comprehend how someone could weaponize another woman's grief so publicly. Adrian told me to stop reading her posts. "You know how Camille is, she exaggerates everything for attention," he said. But there was no exaggeration. It was deliberate, targeted, and cruel. The silence of my husband cut just as deeply as her malice. He thought avoiding conflict would keep the family peace, but his refusal to stand up for me only made me feel more alone. By the time Camille had her third child, I had already lost most of my strength to fight. I thought I had no tears left to shed. Yet when she named her daughter Sophie and posted another set of gleaming photos, this time with a caption that read, "Wish this Sophie were yours, Elise," I felt something inside me collapse. It was not only grief but humiliation, the sense that my pain had become her spectacle. Her followers showered her with praise for her creativity, never knowing the cruelty embedded in every word. Through 4 years of futile attempts, countless nights of waiting for a miracle that never came, I finally let go of the hope of becoming a mother. The silence of my empty home became a kind of armor. I stopped speaking about it, stopped dreaming of baby clothes or lullabies. But forgetting is not healing. It was only endurance, the kind that leaves scars invisible but permanent. And then, one evening at yet another family dinner, Camille leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine, her eyes glinting with mischief. "So, Elise," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "what names are you keeping in reserve for me? I might need inspiration for baby number 4. The table erupted with laughter. Adrian looked down at his plate, silent, pretending not to notice the way my hand trembled around my fork. In that moment, I felt something ignite inside me. Not grief this time, not despair, but rage, pure, sharp, unflinching. I realized I had allowed Camille to define the terms of my suffering, to shape my story into her cruel theater. I had endured her mockery, Adrian's indifference, the weight of my own silence. But as I sat there, the laughter echoing around me, I knew it could not continue. The anger was not wild. It was cold, precise, like a blade sharpened over years of pain. I no longer wanted to plead for understanding or beg for respect. I wanted justice, or at least a response she would never forget. That night, as the echoes of her laughter lingered in my ears, I made a decision. Camille insisted on turning my grief into her stage, then I would become the director of the next act. I would no longer sit quietly while she played with the ashes of my losses. I decided to strike back. Tea was during another family gathering, the kind where Camille always performed for attention, that I conceived the idea. I had learned by then that the only way to protect myself from her cruelty was to turn her vanity against her. So, with a steady voice, I told a story I had invented, that while sorting through my late mother's belongings, I had discovered an old journal. In it, I claimed, there was a page written in her careful script where she had circled a single name, Seraphine. I explained, with just enough hesitation to make it believable, that the name meant sacred child in an obscure dialect of Old French. I even went as far as to create a fake journal page, complete with faded ink and delicate handwriting, then a Pinterest board filled with ancient scripts and etymologies to prove the story. Camille, predictably, fell into the trap without hesitation. Her eyes lit up as if she had discovered a hidden treasure no one else could claim. Within days, she announced on her Instagram that her unborn daughter would be named Seraphine Claire, proclaiming it a family tradition, a sacred legacy passed down through generations. Her followers applauded her for honoring her heritage, showering her with comments about the beauty and uniqueness of the name. Meanwhile, I smiled in silence, because the truth was cruelly ironic. Seraphine, though lovely and sound, was also the brand name of a notorious laxative sold decades ago. Every time I saw her posts, boasting of her noble lineage, I felt a grim satisfaction settle inside me. And then, something I never dared hope for happened. Against all odds, I found myself pregnant again. This time, the child survived past the dreaded 12th week, then into the 20th, and finally the 29th. Each passing day was a miracle. Adrian and I kept it secret, shielding it from the world as though silence itself might guard the fragile life within me. I refused to speak the name aloud, refused to decorate a nursery. Hope was dangerous, and I had been betrayed by it too many times before. But fate had its own plan. When Camille hosted her grandbaby shower, an event as ostentatious as one might expect, floral arches, catered desserts, photographers capturing every laugh, I attended reluctantly. The room buzzed with her curated energy. Gifts piled high, glasses of champagne sparkled under chandeliers, and Camille, glowing in her designer dress, reveled in the spotlight. Then, as she prattled on about little Seraphine Claire, basking in admiration, I stood. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my resolve was iron. Slowly, I laid a hand against my rounded belly and revealed what I had hidden for months. "I am pregnant," I announced, my voice clear enough to slice through the chatter. The room fell silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Eyes widened, shifting between me and Adrian. Even Camille, master of theatrics, looked stunned. For once, her stage was stolen. And then, for the first time in all our marriage, Adrian stepped forward, not as a silent witness, but as my defender. With a steadiness I had never seen in him, he turned to the guests and said, "Seraphine is not a family name. Elise created it. It's a fabrication." His words cut through the tension, exposing Camille's vanity for what it was. Murmurs rippled through the room. Camille's carefully crafted image cracked before everyone, leaving her humiliated. In that moment, I felt something rare, vindication. My suffering had not been in vain. For once, she bore the weight of ridicule. But joy is a fragile thing. That night, long after the laughter and whispers of the party faded, pain tore through my abdomen like fire. The hospital, the sterile lights blurred as doctors spoke words I could no longer bear to hear. Another miscarriage. My fourth. 29 weeks, when I had dared to believe, dared to imagine holding a living child, everything was ripped away again. This time, though, something was different. It was not my body betraying me, it was someone else's hand. The doctors discovered traces of a toxic substance in the vitamins I had been taking. My mind raced back instantly to 2 days before, when Camille had come to our home under the guise of helping prepare the nursery. She had smiled, laughed, touched the bottles on my nightstand with her painted nails. And now here I was, empty again. Police were called. Investigators combed through what little evidence there was. Without proof, nothing could be done. But Adrian, poor Adrian, who had lived his life fleeing conflict, this time could not deny what stared him in the face. While taking out the trash, he found the empty vitamin bottle buried deep inside the bin outside our home. When he held it, his hands trembled so violently he nearly dropped it. I saw in his eyes the collapse of denial, the moment he realized the sister he had defended was capable of monstrous cruelty. For me, the miscarriage marked a turning point. My grief hardened into clarity. I could no longer rely on the law or on Adrian's wavering strength to protect me. Camille wanted to turn my life into her playground, then I would make her stage her undoing. So I began documenting everything. Every malicious post she had ever written, every veiled comment, every mocking caption. I took screenshots of her taunts, archived her Instagram stories, saved messages laced with passive aggression. Piece by piece, I started building the case she thought I would never dare to make. I was no longer only grieving. I was preparing for war. I thought I had already seen the worst of Camille's cruelty. I was wrong. It began with a conversation that at first seemed ordinary. Margot, one of Camille's closest friends, was a pharmacist in her 30s, charming in the way that made people trust her without thinking. She had always been polite to me, though never particularly close. One afternoon, months before the baby shower, she approached me with what I now see as a carefully rehearsed curiosity. "Elise," she said lightly, "have you ever looked into treatments for infertility? Things like hormonal injections or maybe prescription medications? The way she asked unsettled me. Her tone was casual, but her eyes flickered with something she couldn't hide. The time I brushed it off as an awkward attempt at conversation, but after the miscarriage and the toxic vitamins, her words began to echo in my mind. So I confronted her. I found her during her shift at the pharmacy, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptic and plastic packaging. My voice shook as I demanded answers. Margot, did you have anything to do with the vitamins? Did Camille? Her face drained of color, and for a moment she stood frozen, the register beeping softly behind her. I can't, she whispered, her gaze darting around as though someone might be listening. You can't what? Pressed, leaning closer. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. Camille made me. She threatened me. She said if I didn't help, she'd tell everyone I stole medication from the pharmacy sedatives. I didn't want to, Elise. But she gave me the bottle. She told me to switch it. My chest tightened, rage and terror tangling together. I begged her to repeat it, to say it again, but she shook her head violently. I can't. I've said too much already. Her eyes glistened with tears. Be careful. Camille, she's not going to stop. She's stealing your mail, Elise. I saw documents, envelopes. She's after your adoption papers. My stomach dropped. Adrian and I had finally gathered the courage to apply for adoption, hoping to create the family my body had denied us. Those papers were the future we had clung to, and now even that hope was under threat. From that day forward, Camille escalated her war against me. She created fake social media accounts under my name. On them, she posted deranged rants, claiming I wanted to steal children from their families, that I was obsessed with motherhood to the point of madness. Her followers believed every word. Within days, my inbox overflowed with hundreds of messages, insults, threats, people calling me a lunatic, a monster. Then came the protests. One morning, as I arrived at the newspaper where I had worked for more than a decade, I found a mob gathered outside. They carried signs that read "Child Snatcher" and "Keep your kids safe from Elise." Phones recorded me as I walked, their voices jeering, their chants cutting into me. My colleagues stared from the windows above, faces pale with discomfort. By the end of the week, my editor called me into his office. He said the paper had no choice. Until my personal situation was resolved, I was suspended. Camille had taken not only my hope of motherhood, but also the career I had built with my own hands. And she was not finished. Somehow, she gained access to my medical history and altered it. I discovered this when the adoption agency contacted us, their voices strained with polite caution. They said there was a concerning entry in my file, several hospitalizations for psychiatric breakdowns that had never happened. Pages had been fabricated, complete with doctors' signatures. Our application was frozen indefinitely. I felt as though I were drowning. Each time I tried to surface, Camille pressed me back under. The breaking point came with a phone call. It was Amelie, Camille's eldest daughter. She was only 9, but her voice shook with the weight of something no child should carry. "Aunt Elise," she whispered, "Mom says we have to lie. She says we have to tell people you're mean to us, that you hurt us. But it isn't true. I don't want to say it. I don't want to." My heart ached at the sound of her quiet sob. With trembling hands, I pressed record on my phone. "It's okay, sweetheart," I murmured. "You're very brave for telling me." That recording became my only weapon, a shred of truth in a storm of lies. But even then, Camille twisted the narrative. When confronted, she accused me of manipulating her daughter, of planting words in the mouth of a child. Her fans, blind, loyal, rabid, amplified her accusations. "You're a predator," one message read. "She's using children for attention," another posted publicly. The attacks escalated. Someone leaked our home address. Adrian and I woke one morning to find our mailbox stuffed with hate letters. our front door defaced with spray paint, child hunter. People drove by slowly, shouting insults from their windows. Tonight, I heard footsteps outside, the crunch of gravel that made my skin prickle with fear. We lived as though under siege. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, whispers instead of conversation. Adrian grew thinner, his hands shaking as he tried to comfort me, though his own despair showed in his hollow eyes. I could feel the weight of his guilt pressing on him, that for years he had protected Camille, that his silence had allowed her cruelty to grow. I too carried guilt. For not seeing sooner, for letting her turn my grief into her theater. But guilt had to give way to resolve. So I kept recording. Every insult, every comment, every protest outside my office. I built a digital fortress of evidence, posts, screenshots, timestamps, the whispered confession of a frightened 9-year-old. Because if Camille had turned the world against me, then I would turn her lies into her downfall. The war she started was no longer about names or stolen dreams. It was about survival. And I intended to survive. That anonymous message arrived at midnight, a small, clinical file dropped into my phone like a stone. I watched it 3 times before I let Adrian see it. The footage was grainy, camera angle from the corner of our backyard, time-stamped but with a gap, and it showed Camille slipping through the back gate, hood up, moving with the quiet deliberation of someone who had done this before. She carried a small amber bottle in one hand and paused by the kitchen window, glancing around as if checking for cameras. The clip ended abruptly as she ducked out of frame. Whoever had sent it had clipped the edges so that it would never be admissible in court. It was frustratingly precise, enough to make a face undeniable, not enough to be law. Till the effect was immediate. Adrian's face went paler than I'd seen in years. The look in his eyes was not only fear but a kind of furious betrayal. He had been defending her for so long that to see her on our property, nocturnal and secretive, made his previous passivity feel like cowardice. He stopped speaking for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was low and rigid. "Not anymore," he said. "No more excuses." He changed the locks that week. He bought cameras and placed them where he thought they would be invisible but thorough, the back door, the hallway, by the nightstand. He rerouted our mail to the post office, insisted I stop accepting packages on my own. It felt small and practical at first, defensive measures against a petty stalker, but each bolt he turned spelled out something larger. He was finally choosing me. Then, as if fate had a taste for theater, the confrontation came at my mother-in-law's 90th birthday. The hall was full of flowers and old photographs. Everyone was at their best, speaking in the flattened politeness of family rites. I had hoped the day would be simple, harmless. But Camille was there, extravagant and predatory as ever, and sometime after dessert she cornered me in the women's restroom. She closed the stall door with a force that made the mirror rattle and leaned in close, breath smelling faintly of perfume and celebration cake. "You should know," she hissed, smiling with her eyes. "I have friends everywhere. Adoption offices are small worlds, Elise. I know people who can, how should I put it, rewrite histories. If I wanted to, I could have your application buried for good." The words were casual, boastful. The threat was a practiced performance. I fumbled for my phone and hit record, hands trembling. I got almost everything. Her voice, the way she tossed the word rewrite like a game. The part where she admitted to the schemes about cooperating with an insider was there in full, and I felt the paper-thin breath of vindication touch my skin. But then, in the middle of her sentence, my voice memo app froze. The device hiccuped, the red recording dot stilled, and the crucial seconds, the exact confession I needed, were lost. The silence where that audio should have been felt like a theft. It might have stayed a near miss if not for Julian. Camille's husband, Julian, had been keeping his own counsel. He was not someone who sought the spotlight. He had been watching with a growing, horrified attention. A few nights later, he handed me a small, disheveled journal. It was Camille's. Pages were full of slanted script, lists, schedules, names, fragments that at first looked like the petty obsessions of an influencer. But then I read the paragraphs that mattered. Plans sketched in practical language, mentions of a pharmacist who would switch bottles, a note about a hospital contact who would amend records, and an ink that did not waver, an entry that matched the phrasing she had used in the bathroom, the line about making sure Elise never becomes a mother. The words punched the air out of me. Julian stood there while I read, his face drained of color. He told us, voice cracking, that he could not live with the deceit. He filed for divorce within days and, when asked, agreed to testify. The small, human rupture of his choice felt like a miracle and a calamity at once. Truth had an ally now, but the fallout would be violent. Camille's response was instant and ugly. She staged a counterattack, fabricating allegations against us so loud and vile they summoned the police. Officers searched our home, methodical and clinical, rifling through cabinets and closets under the glare of flashlight beams. They found nothing. The intrusion itself felt criminal, our privacy torn open, but worse was the note left on our threshold after the search, a single sentence written in hurried black marker. "Stop, or next time they'll find something." It was a threat that was not subtle. We had to act quickly. We called a family meeting and put everything on the table. The room smelled of coffee and tension. I sat with the journal in my hands. Adrian placed printed screenshots on the dining table, emails Camille had sent to contacts about herbal compounds with miscarriage-inducing properties, timestamps that matched days we had been ill. Julian, pale and steady, recounted the entries he had read. I handed a recording of Amelie's whispered confession to my brother-in-law to play aloud. We laid out the camera footage I had, the photos of the switched vitamins, the screenshots of malicious posts. Camille's reaction was a collapse and an eruption. For a moment she seemed stunned, as if the walls had closed in. Then she lunged toward a vase on the mantel and hurled it across the room. Porcelain shattered like an accusation. Her voice rose into a raw, animal howl. She screamed that she should have used a stronger dose, that she regretted only that she had not made certain I would never be a mother. The words left her mouth like poison and hung in the air, heavy and irredeemable. The family sat frozen. I watched Adrian's father, stooped, reserved, a man I had tried to win over with kindness, go from disbelief to a kind of righteous fury. He pointed at Camille and, with a voice I will never forget, ordered her to leave. She stumbled out of the house not like a triumphant provocateur, but like someone exposed and stripped of props. Camille's children, little faces I had once smiled at, ran to their father and collapsed into his arms, their small bodies turning away from the woman who had raised them. They did not look back. In that moment, the household split along a seam that had been forming for years. Our lives were not healed, far from it, but the axis had shifted. The danger was raw and real, but so was the alliance against it. We had torn the curtain aside and forced the darkness into the light. Question that followed was no longer whether Camille had done this, but what to do next with the wreckage left behind. Camille finally faced justice. After violating the restraining order, the surveillance cameras captured her following us late at night, clutching her phone like a weapon. There was no way to deny it anymore. In court, she broke down, confessing to everything, from tampering with my prenatal vitamins to orchestrating an online smear campaign. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison. The sound of the gavel striking would felt like the closing of a chapter one had been forced to endure for far too long. Her blog, once a polished showcase of inspiration and family values, collapsed within days. When her private journal leaked, filled with twisted plans and resentments, her followers turned on her. The admiration that had fueled her cruelty turned into disgust. Julian, her husband, won custody of their children. I will never forget the look on Amelie's face when she ran into his arms, finally free of the fear her mother had instilled. For Adrian and me, life began anew. Our adoption process was approved at last, and we welcomed beautiful twins, Sophie and Louis, into our family. Their names were deliberate choices, reclaimed from the ashes of what Camille tried to steal from us. Months later, we took in Clara, Camille's youngest, born in prison. I gave her the middle name Verite, truth, a living reminder that no lie, no cruelty can stand forever. Children grew close quickly. Amelie and her siblings called me Aunt Elise, and they treated Sophie, Louis, and Clara as their own. Our home, once scarred by intrusion and fear, now rang with laughter and the clatter of little feet. Professionally, I returned to journalism, this time stronger, promoted for my resilience. And in my heart, I knew the love that had been tested beyond measure had survived, and it had prevailed. From this journey, I want to share 5 lessons I had to learn the hardest way possible. 1. Evil often hides behind a polished mask. What you see online is not always real. Sometimes it's a facade built to cover a very different truth. 2. Silence empowers cruelty. Speaking up, even when your voice shakes, is the only way to break the cycle of manipulation. 3. Evidence is your strongest ally. Screenshots, recordings, witnesses, document everything when someone tries to twist reality. For family is built on truth, not blood. Biology alone doesn't make someone worthy of trust or love. Chosen bonds can be stronger than inherited ones. 5. Resilience is the quiet form of victory. It doesn't always roar, it often whispers, "I survived and I will keep going." If my story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of truth over lies and resilience over cruelty, I ask you to support this journey. Like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the lessons we continue to uncover together. 'Cause in the end, love and truth always outlast deception.